Another day, another digging for dollars. I'm CJ Kim with my colleague Matt Wilson. We are in the midst of crazy drill season, and so we'll start with make or break. What do you want to talk about, Matt?
Let's start with drill holes. We are recording September 2nd at 10:41. The market is ripping. Pacific time, 10:41. The market's absolutely ripping. And Pacific time, let's talk about a company, Great Pacific Gold. Comes out 8 meters of 50 grams per ton today. A little bit of a carry there, but some crazy rock, 0.8 meters of 320 grams gold and 4% copper. This could have been the one that got away. We don't own this deal. So usually we're talking make or break. I try and pitch our own portfolio, but that was a big hit. And these guys are on an island they're in PNG, Papua New Guinea. They're in an island on the island northeast of the major island where like K2 is. And you see a lot of exploration there. Massive, like 1,000+ square kilometer land package. I think they just raised about $18 million with the Haywood guys. 45 cent stock, I think, is 52. Lots of big gold hits, lots of copper in there, really interesting rock. This epithermal vein type system, porphyry feeder, all that good stuff. Lots of cash. They're going to keep drilling. Good guys, Discovery Group guys. They actually spun out Golden Cross AUX, which is just ripping next door to Southern Cross as well. I think they still hold some shares. 150 million shares out. 50-cent stock, 8 meters, 50 grams per ton, make or break as they push this forward. I'd say it's a make so far.
It's a make so far. What's the market cap?
Well, 75. So 75 million market cap with 18 million in cash.
So they're well on their way to making it. And that whole...
I didn't remember the K2 story. I didn't follow that as closely. I don't know what sent them to the moon. Do you remember what happened? Like what was it? Because PNG is not the easiest place to operate. Very expensive costs, right? But crazy. I remember Sean Hood, our old colleague Sean Hood, used to say it's the best geology in the world because deposits are still forming like now.
I think they took it from a major who couldn't do work on it anymore after some sort of incident. And then, the geology and gold was all there and, new regime, and they're able to get it running again. And it's one of the better high-grade stories out there, right?
Yeah. Well, market likes it. Up today, 25%. A little bit over issue, but anyway, definitely an interesting thing to watch. There's lots of really big grades there, so that's always a fun thing to follow.
Okay. Another moment, we have a company in Morocco, Stellar Africa Gold Drilling. They just completed their first hole, and this is a fun story because they're floating around a $5 million market cap. I would say discounted if you're looking at all the other drillers out there. Maybe it's because they're in Morocco and it's a jurisdiction not a lot of people know of. But prior to this hole, they've been drilling out incredible trenches at one of their targets, and really quickly, really really long intervals of gold. For example, 155 of 3.5. But within these intervals of gold, you're getting more high-grade shoots, 5 meters of 24, 5 meters of 11, 11 meters of 5. So, like, the gold is there, and they've isolated, and this is where, I'm not a technical guy, but the gold is contained in the diorites, and this was proven out by their big and systematic trenching exploration. And the first hole that they pulled out to a depth of 225 meters, they intercepted 3 intervals of diorite and, a total of 50 meters of diorite. And now they're waiting on assays to see if the drill holes are similar to that of the trenches. And, if the diorite contains gold, they're going to be pulling out a lot of gold from these drill holes. So, 5 million market cap, the first batch of assays should be back in September. So that's pretty exciting, considering that everything up to this point confirmed their geological, models and interpretations of what they have.
Big make. Could be a big make. Fun story. This story, they were focused on Cote d'Ivoire, maybe, I think, for the longest time because they couldn't get permits from Morocco, and so they left it after the trench. But I think big make on visuals for all non-geologists. The best way to think about a trench is it's a long surface, and then now the drill is under surface, And so if the lithology, the rock type is the same as we go along, that's at least what I thought from this release. I was like, okay, so it looks the same as what they saw on surface that pulled 150 meters of 3 grams. So that seems pretty exciting. And so I know Steve from 3L had gone over there and is a big fan of the project. And so that will be a fun one to watch. If there's grades there, I think how many shares are out?
For they have 41 million shares out.
15 cents, 41 million shares. Not a lot of cash, but
A little bit under a million now, but I imagine if they hit, they'll come to the market for a little bit something more meaningful. But
man, would that be a good re-rate? Could be a good one.
yeah, considering all the other drill plays out there have is this a product of the market that we're seeing right now? We're not losers. We're like stock picking gods right now. The markets are running and we can't go wrong.
Reminds me of when we started, man. It's like throw some darts. Now everyone's an expert now, right? I think that now it's, when you see markets like, do we think that this is going to continue? We're not focusing on macro here or politics or anything like that, but it looks good. It's like, you do, it looks like the market is the gold market looks pretty healthy, and commodities seem right. And we've kind of been pushing the inflation push for a bit, like in the fund. So, and just our model in general. So hopefully it keeps going, because it's a lot more fun when everyone's making money and then new people come into the market and new buying happens and it's not the same people over and over. So
Oh, it would be nice to see more capital trickle into the sandbox we're in. Okay, next topic. As an explorer partnering with a senior or producer, is this a way to create more shareholder value? So, as an explorer, you can partner with a senior in several ways. There's the option slash earn-in strategy where a senior has to hit certain explorations commitments or milestones to earn into typically a majority stake into a project. These agreements later turn into JVs, or you can start off as a joint venture right away, where the explorationist puts up the land, the senior spends more money, and at a certain point, each party is funding their proportion of ownership. Normally, the explorer gets diluted away. They just don't have the spending and capital as the explorers. Straight up equity investment from a producer, and those typically come with some sort of ROFR or back-end agreement there. More, I guess, not so dilutive way of partnering with a royalty or streaming group and giving up you know, a piece of the upside in the future. But that again, you're not giving up any sort of operational. You're not giving up the reins of the operational whereabouts that way. So, is there a certain way you like doing things, or is a certain way you like seeing an exploration company approach funding their projects?
So what we're sort of talking about is access to capital, right? Like we're talking about, do you like when a big company is the provider of capital to a little company, in essence, and then all of the ways that we do it down the road, right? Like there's so many ways. We just went over a bunch of them, right? So do we like when a large company comes into a small company? And in mining, like, do you like when Google Ventures invest money into a startup tech company? Probably. But do you like when we all relate to that with a little bit more, I think, with big things like that, but at least I do. And this, I don't know, kind of it's a give and take. I think that if you don't give up control, I think that there was this book in the 90s called The Innovator's Dilemma, where it basically just talks about big companies not being able to innovate. And in our business, innovation is discovery, right? So big companies can't innovate because the people in the middle don't want to get fired for taking big chances, in essence. And I think that plays out a lot in mining, because you need to take risk. You need to be willing to lose money and look bad. And I think that if you give up control, what happens is things go slow. How many deals do we know that when people JV them out for 51%, it seems great because you're a smaller company and you lose control over it, right? One example that is the total counteraction to that is C3 Metals. He's done a great job. Like Freeport came in for 75% in their project in Jamaica. I love that project. but they had this backup project in Peru, which is not a backup so much. People seem to be getting really excited. So that's worked out really well. And the stock has moved. But if you have one project and you give it up, that's probably tough. But if a senior is going to give you money and not take control, I don't know. It sounds great. Like Philo got $100 million from BHP for 5% with no bells and whistles attached. BHP ended up buying it, but it just kind of sat there, right? So I don't know. Is there a downside to taking money from a senior company or a larger company if there's no control? I'm highlighting there's lots of downsides if there's control loss, but is there a downside otherwise?
Do you do control as in you're not going to be able to make the decisions that you want as an explorationist? You have to run it through their technical board, or I'm pretty sure they'll put together a committee within their company to go through, the technicals with you. And before you can put anything into the ground, you have to get their stamp of approval. But just getting them on board, isn't that a stamp of, geological endorsement right off the bat? Is that good for shareholders knowing that, these like their technical team got into the data room, they like what they saw, and they're willing to put a lot of money into the junior to move it forward?
I think so, and we'll move to our portfolio for examples. I think so, but I mean, you got to be careful. I think that like the technical expertise is very important, and I'm looking into porphyries right now, and I'm very fortunate because we have some porphyry people on our team. But if you make a porphyry discovery, it's super complicated. And I know, look at American Eagle. They brought in tech and South 32, but the stock suffered, but they had huge technical support on the project, right? Agnico goes into Canada nickel at a massive premium. They put $40 million into it, right? Massive technical support. Stock didn't really move. Atex gets Agnico to put money in. They also have Pierre Lassonde. Pierre Lassonde is a common theme right now among companies, right? Southern Cross as well. You have big shareholders instead of big companies who are maybe a little bit more risk tolerant. Those things are moving. So I don't know. It's a tough. I think that the technical expertise is really good, but if there's a prevention of you being an exploration company that kind of pushes it forward, then maybe not, right? Because I think that you need that committee and stuff like that. And I think that brings us, you look at Hannon, which is a big position for us, right? Mike Hudson, Southern Cross into Hannon. He also runs Hannon. And they brought in very early on. They have this, like, it's so big a land package. It's hard to comprehend in Peru, this other side of the kind of the porphyry belt. And they brought in Sumitomo in a $35 million earn-in when they were quite small, just for the sediment-hosted copper on their project. Then Teck is a major investor in the company, and they're pushing forward on gold and stuff like that. And that seems to have worked pretty well as they've pushed forward, right? Midnight Sun did a really good job bringing in cobalt for part of their property. I don't know if there's a negative aspect in it really in there, but like, is that a bad thing taking that in? I think that it seemed like pretty good there.
How about, are you giving up any upside by bringing in a major, knowing that that's potentially the only exit that you'll have? Maybe not, because if you don't, maybe they don't take in a large, especially on the equity side, right? They're just equity investors into the company, not the project. And so is there some sort of shadow overhang there where, why bother bringing anyone else to bid on your company when you have a major investor in there already?
Yeah, that's possible. I know that's always a fear, right? So if you had a BHP invested, everyone's like, well, we're not going to go over the top of BHP, but really BHP could go over the top anyway. I think that gets overblown a little bit, but I do think, and in our experience thus far in the last year or two, I would caution people following majors into a deal at that price, because the major doesn't care the way we do for a 10% move. They need a certain percentage. And there's a different scheme in there, right? I mean, they do care. Obviously, they want to make money, but like they need to be able to give you enough money so that you can do real work. And so I definitely have seen a trend of where, there's a lead from a Kinross or a Teck or whatever it is, and then they set this price that just seems too high. It's just too high. And relatively speaking, it's not that good. But then, the stock comes back down when it's an early stage project and it doesn't work, but they wanted to be there to kind of see it and go forward as first stamp. So that would be the only thing that I would caution in terms of the pricing and a major kind of coming in. But I know that, we have big position in Hercules. Hercules had this huge thing with Barrick recently, right? Like they had Barrick who came in as a strategic, and they did this big land grab, and that again, that's sort of matching expertise. But there's the question: does that? What do you think about that? Does that change anything? Does that move anything in and out from upside? It didn't seem to in this case.
It didn't seem to. And when you're dealing with, what you mentioned before, porphyries, you need a lot of money eventually, right? He was at that stage where you needed that huge cash inflow to drill. There is that old adage, friend or foe, take the dough.
I think so, as long as you don't lose control. I think the control is the big piece for a junior because you have to be able to do your work as a junior. I remember all those Arizona copper porphyry stories that farmed out to Friedland. What was that one? Bellhopper, or anyway, they farmed this huge project out of Friedland, and he had spent like 6 years deciding whether he would drill a hole, and then he didn't drill a hole. It's just, so you got to be careful on stuff like that. But I think that as the market moves forward, the value of capital, the cost of capital, which is at the end of the day is what we're talking about, the value of capital, it's cheaper capital for people as the market goes up.
So there are good and bads.
There's pros and cons. Yeah, I think don't run into it. But obviously, it's a validation, and I think a helpful thing for all juniors as you have senior companies come in, and hopefully there's more as people continue to make more money. Hopefully, there's more money flowing back into the system, right?
In previous episodes, we said we don't really plan on guests. Um, we don't pick the guests on what topics we choose to speak about, but in this case, we did. We were talking about explorers partnering with majors. We mentioned Hercules. Our guest today is Chris Paul, a CEO and geologist with almost 20 years of discovery and capital markets experience. Small world, we know Chris because he was a principal and founder of Ridgeline Exploration, which was acquired by Goldspot Discoveries in 2021. And of course, Earth Labs was Goldspot Discoveries before we pieced out our exploration tech. Chris was also very much fundamental in the copper and gold discoveries of Golden Ridge Resources and Demera Gold. Very excited and happy to have Chris on today. Hey, Chris Paul, how's it going?
Good, guys. How are you?
What's going on, man? Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
Fresh off the porphyry track. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here.
Chris, so nice to have you here. We love Hercules. We love the project. We love Idaho. You were really in there early. And maybe you have this big deal done recently with Barrick. Maybe you could take us through that just right off the bat. Just go through what just happened and this big transaction you just did.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the audience, it's not necessarily familiar with Big and the background. So, company that came out exploring for silver, made a big porphyry copper discovery in 2023. About a month later, Barrick Gold invested roughly $23 million into the company. Now, because this was a new porphyry discovery, in like the first one to ever be discovered in Idaho, it basically represents an entirely new belt of porphyry copper deposits. And so there's been a lot of historical exploration in this belt, we'll call it, for silver. And interestingly, the silver is actually hosted in the post-mineral cover. So you got these sort of younger rocks that are sitting on top of the porphyry that host silver, but they all came up the same structure. And so what Barrick basically did is there's this whole 70-kilometer belt of these silver occurrences, these epithermal silver occurrences, going kind of a long trend from Hercules. So they got helicopters mobilized because this was like the winter of 2023, 2024, and they went and staked about 5,000 claims covering the entire belt. Now, they've spent roughly a year, call it, doing various exploration, stream sets, and mapping and prospecting, this sort of stuff. But the challenge that they've run into is these porphyries aren't sticking out of the ground. And so, yes, there's a lot of this epithermal silver everywhere. And yes, there's probably porphyries, deep down underneath these things. But because there was no big booming, Barrick-sized porphyry targets sticking out of the ground, they didn't have any drill targets. So, they sort of reached a decision point. They want to stay invested in Big. And in fact, they're going to increase their equity position in Big. But they would rather consolidate this whole district scale package under the Hercules umbrella. And so what we did is we did an option deal. So Big optioned all of Barrick's regional claims in exchange for $8 million in stock to be issued over 3 years. So the initial payment we've just given them was $2 million in stock. And we have 3 years now to explore these claims and decide if we want to fully earn in 100% interest in them.
Oh, so it was all a share deal.
All shares.
Oh, that is a cool deal then.
Exactly. They reached a point after 1 year where they realized like it's not going anywhere. So like their own exploration. So they didn't want the claims, right? In other words, because there's no big Barrick-sized target sticking out of the ground here. It's going to take another probably 1 or 2 years minimum of doing, deep seeking NT and geophysics, drumming up drill targets, doing the work with the Forest Service to do these, drill permits. And they said, well, look, we want to be a long-term shareholder of Hercules. We're happy to do an all-share deal. And if you think about it, right, like this is a 3-year deal. So we're going to be issuing stock over the next 3 years. So, for us and for our investors, I think it's a pretty good signal that they're invested in Big for the long term, despite the fact that they've given up these claims, which, there's been a lot of negativity surrounded around them. But
From the market, for the perspective of Big, or for the perspective of Barrick?
well, from the perspective of, oh my God, well, Barrick's selling their claims.
Oh, they must not like it.
They must not like it, right? But at the same time they sold their claims, they've agreed to increase their equity position in Big over a 3-year period.
Well, I can see why people would kind of go down that rabbit hole and overthink things, but originally they had the huge endorsement in you guys by investing in you for the claims that you already have, and it makes total sense now that they want to consolidate everything under Hercules, and eventually, once you prove out what Idaho has in that porphyry belt, they can make a larger decision further down the line, right?
Look, I mean, Leviathan, which is what we call the porphyry discovery on the Hercules ground, that's the big one, right? That's the one that looks like it could be potentially Barrick size, like 5 million tons contain copper or more, right? That's the exploration target there. There's, everything else is pure greenfields. And we're talking about greenfields where you've got post-mineral copper sitting on top of that. So that's better suited for the junior to, plug away at for another, 1 or 2 years of, geophysics and that sort of stuff, right? It just makes more sense strategically.
We were talking about, right before you got on, we were talking about the reason why is it that seniors don't make discoveries? Why aren't we just watching Barrick and Rio and BHP and all these guys with endless pockets, right? With like deep pockets. Why aren't they making the discoveries? And they just don't. It's not really how it works. And it's so interesting. Like, new porphyry belt. I always think of, only because I've recently learned a lot about it, the Vicuña district, which, was an overnight success that took 30 years. And, that was staked in 1996, and it took, the Lundins and push and the Wojtek and pushing these things forward. From 2009, I mean, NGX was worth $30 million in 2009 and owned all the entire thing, right? So like these new porphyry districts take time, and then it wasn't until 2020 when BHP came in to Filo, right? And then everything took off, and so it is an interesting thing here that this is so novel, right? So it kind of makes sense that they wouldn't be pushing that forward. I think for the listener, like, what's the hardest part about porphyry exploration? Like, what you've gone into this. But what's the toughest part for you?
Yeah, definitely the fact that they're not sticking out of the ground anymore, right? So I referenced this in an interview I just did with Tony Moreau, but I think it's a BHP chart. You guys have probably seen it. And it basically, shows, I think, time on the x-axis and depth of like how deep porphyry discoveries are. And so basically, if you look back, obviously, the 50s, 60s, 70s, like everything that was found, all these porphyries were discovered at surface. But then they start getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And as time goes on, you get to 2025, and all discoveries now are being made undercover. And that's just the reality. Like there's simply no giant porphyry systems sticking out of the ground, right, at surface anymore that are ready to be found. So that means that you have to now use technology. You have to use new geological concepts, and like you have to have a very, very, very solid understanding, modern understanding of the complexity of porphyry copper systems, because not only do you have to drill through cover to get down to it, but very likely that first hole you drill, or even some of the follow-up holes may not necessarily go straight into the bullseye center, right? They might be somewhere along the margins, and you need to understand where you are, outside of that system and where the next hole needs to go. So it's definitely a challenging thing, and it takes time.
Sure is a big payoff though when it works, right? Like these things are not that easy to find, and I think that when you hit that first hole, I know the 186 meters of 0.86, and had that higher grade core of the 1.97, and I know that all of us, we were all looking at each other like, wow, that's probably not the best hole, because it's pretty early. And so the project, you just keep hitting copper, and I think that these things take a lot of time, and it's exciting to follow, and we're big shareholders and love what you're doing, and I think that is a good segue into pitching another deal in our new segment of Dig This Deal. Cejay, maybe you can explain to Chris what Dig This Deal is all about.
Okay, so Dig This Deal is where we each pitch a stock. It's going to remain anonymous until the end of it. The only requirement is to tell us the market cap, so we can have some sort of comparison or some sort of way to hinge a value to it. But that in itself is, there's a lot of other variables at work here. And so each of us will pitch a stock, and the other two will decide if they dig it or not, or more digging, or, whatever. You can decide what you want to do with it. And so, we've done it with all of our guests so far. We've had a great reception to it, because I think a lot of people listen to our show because they just want to learn about deals and potential investments to throw onto their radar. So that's Dig This Deal. Who wants to go first?
Obviously, Hercules, we already pitched. That can't be the deal.
No, I wouldn't come on here and do that. So I'll go first. With a big caveat here. So I'm not a stock picker. Big is literally a 7-day-a-week job. It really is. I pick stocks and have all kinds of fun doing this, but you just get to a point where you just let your broker do that kind of work for you. So, Cejay, you called me whatever week ago, said let's come on the show, and so I phoned a friend. I had to phone a friend on this one. I was like,
You get a helpline.
yeah, absolutely, right. And so I'll tell you who it is after that I phoned. He's pretty well respected fund manager. So he gave me two names. I looked at both of them. One was kind of boring, and the other one is just bizarre. Okay.
Nice. We like those ones.
I don't own it. I didn't go. I am not going and buying it yet. I'm going to predict that you guys are probably not going to dig it, but I'm very, very curious, because it kind of brings up an interesting dilemma with this one. Okay. Comes down to the P's, right? People, project, promotion, place, right? Like, if it doesn't necessarily tick all the boxes, do you still go ahead? One of the boxes is really good. So, okay. So company I picked, it's got 80 million shares out. So 40 million market cap. Now, this was just very recently, this was a 6 million market cap, like in February. Okay. But they just announced a new discovery. Projects in Chile, and it's immediately adjacent to El Salvador, right? So world-class porphyry copper deposit, Cejay. Right? See all the infrastructures, fucking smelters like 15K away. It's a good-sized property, like 9,000 hectares. These guys own it 100%. There's no royalties. It's clean. And I don't know how the hell these guys got this thing. Okay. So, all right. So let's get into this discovery they just made. So it's a very, the problem I have with it is that the management team is very concerning to me. Okay. So these are kind of some older guys. They don't seem to be able to put together much of a website or a news release. I mean, they've been plugging away this thing, but it seems like everywhere they drill on this project, they're just hitting bangers, like absolute crackers. Okay, so there's like 4 targets that they've drilled, all really good. Now, just in March, this is where it gets weird. They've just gone to a new target, brand new target on the project, and drilled 3 holes, 500 meters apart. Like so just imagine you had a new target on one of your properties, and you just come out swinging like 500 meters, step outs with seemingly no rhyme or reason, and they hit on every hole. They hit on every single hole and bottoming in mineralization. So the first one hits 153 meters of a gram gold, first hole. Second hole is like 86 meters of a gram. Third hole, 70 meters of 0.74, plus another 24 meters of 1.3 further up the hole. Okay. Now, it's epithermal mineralization, so it's right next to El Salvador, giant porphyry mine, and it's transitioning into porphyry alteration at depth, where they're actually bottoming in mineralization. So super interesting, like from a geological perspective, super interesting. So this is a totally new discovery, but they've got like 3 other discoveries that they've made on this project, like just very recently or in the last 2 years. So one of the other targets, the first hole, 112 meters of 1.4 grams and 0.14 copper in the first hole. So this is within like a 300 meter intercept of like 0.8 gold.
Okay, I dig it. I dig.
But remember, when we said management trumps all, and we went through that kind of thing, Chris said management is questionable.
Yeah. So another target, totally new target, drilled random hole, 34 meters of 1.5% copper. Fourth target, so this is one that they've actually been drilling for a while. All right, so they got a kilometer of strike defined so far. Just like 2-3 months ago, put out a news release. They drilled a 300 meter step out on this thing. 300 meter step out, so 1.2 kilometer strike length on this thing. This hole hits 7 meters of 6 grams, another 10 meters of 4 grams, so there's 3 intercepts, 7 of 6, 10 of 4, and then 23 meters of 5 grams, all in the same hole, right? So like you add that up, it's 200 gram meters in this hole, right? So there's like smoke everywhere. I mean, it's crazy. So why is it a 40 million market cap, right? So here's the problem. I think this has got to be one of the worst management teams I have come across in a long time. I'm sorry, but it's just, these guys got to do a better job, right? News releases don't make sense. The figures are terrible. The presentation sucks. Like, it's just, I don't even know if they have a serious geologist involved. But so here's the question. Here's what I'm getting at, right? And by the way, you can't find a simple cross section, right? They're drilling discovery after discovery, and there's like, you can't even put out a cross section. So I don't like that. There's also no money. So one of the directors is literally loaning these guys money, like $1 million at a time. So he lent to $1 million for this last drill program. And now he's just lent to another $1 million in these like converts to do another drill program. So ultimately the question is, let's just say, hypothetically of this deal, these guys just don't have much skill with what they're doing. But you can throw darts. The project is like an absolute stunner.
I'm all in. I'm all in to dig the deal, because if I don't know what I'm doing and I still just hit that many holes, then this project is so good. I'm digging, and I'll figure out the rest once I get diluted down to 0.
I gotta dig more.
Yeah, I'm digging in for sure. You gotta like chat with them. Super interesting.
I'm doing this all last night, literally, and I'm just like, what is going on? So,
Chris, that was a good one. That was cool. I like that. I don't know what that is too. I think I might know what it is. I don't know what it is. All right. My deal. My market cap today is $550 million. My last deal is done at $1.80. Stock's $270. I have $40 million in cash. I traded $50 an ounce in a camp in Canada that's produced 25 million ounces of gold, and I have 10 million ounces of gold total. My main project is 7 million ounces divided over 4 pits, basically that are kitty corner to each other in a city block. I'm 10% owned by Eldorado Gold. My 2024 PEA has a 13-year mine life, 600 million capex, and a $2 billion NAV with a 45% IRR. My cash cost is only $1,000. If I use a similar gold price, my nearest comp is Snowline, but I'm not in the Yukon. I'm in Val d'Or. They have a PNAV of 0.5 and mine is 0.2. The CEO of this company is David Palmer, who sold his last company for $550 million to Goldcorp and basically received every award imaginable in 2015. Again, $550 million market cap, $1.80 last deal, $270 stock, $40 million cash, $2 billion NAV. Valdor.
I dig it. I have no idea what it is.
I dig it. Seems safe, if there is safe in our markets.
That's what I like. I like safety.
How about if I can offer you a gold stock with the speculative upside of a junior explorer, but the downside risk of a GIC? Yes?
Sounds too good to be true.
$110 million market cap. Their flagship project is actually a massive greenstone belt located in a very mining-friendly jurisdiction in West Africa. They have 10 million US in cash, but fully funded for their upcoming drill program to expand their existing resource of 1.2 million ounces. But here's the best part of it. They have a collective mining agreement with artisanals on their land where they get a portion of their revenues that these artisanals generate. So, through Q1 to Q3, they were able to report 4.7 million US on their books as revenue. You don't see it as net income. You see it as like other revenue because apparently you can't have it on your books as net income if it's coming from a gold production without a resource. And so all of that money is being funded to explore their hard rock. And as I said before, they're looking to expand their existing resource of 1.2 million ounces. They've already drilled 42 holes. It's looking like everything is open in, strike and at depth. They've bought back, 5 million shares in since 2014. So what they're not showing in value in resource, they're giving back to their shareholders by buying back their shares through their royalty income. And so, 110 may be a little bit expensive, but they are continually buying back shares and putting the money that they earn back into the ground. And, they're a huge greenstone belt. The greenstone belt next to them produced over 140 million ounces. So it's a very prolific belt in the country. And there are very similar geological, characteristics that all of these belts share within the country.
So no need to raise any more lemon. They're just buying back their stock.
They own three drill rigs and they're just sticking it into the ground. They're buying back shares as they go along. And
I'm going to ditch that deal. And I don't ditch a lot of deals without digging in. I think that I would dig into it just because the geology sounds interesting. $100 an ounce. I don't like when junior companies buy back things that does not involve with exploration. If I have a whole greenstone belt, I would rather you take every dollar you have and go find more gold on that greenstone belt, especially if I only have 1 million ounces. If I have 10, I think that just from the fundamental perspective that I have, it's like venture is about risk and exploration. If I want buybacks, I want bigger companies. If I want dividends, I want bigger companies. I think that when people cross those over, it gets really complicated. But that's just me in my look at it.
They're drilling out right now to expand their resource is, continuity along strikes. 750 meters along strike, down 300 meters. But guess what it's called? Orange number 5.
This must be a Vancouver company. All right, naming a zone after a strip club. What's the name?
Well, maybe I don't know what is orange number 5? Where does that come?
Well, it's number 5 orange, but yeah, it's a strip club.
I didn't know that. Thanks, Chris. Okay, my company is called Extra Gold, ticker XTG.
Oh man, that's been around for so long. Shout out to Denny. All right. Mine was Probe Gold, David Palmer, Valdor.
So the company's called San Lorenzo Gold. It was Tom Woolrick that told me about this thing. There was 2 stocks he named. This was one. Apparently, he's got like 4% of the company or something crazy. San Lorenzo Gold, SLG.
Long elevator ride for an elevator pitch, but that's a great one. I'm so curious now. All right.
I'm stuck, man. I can't, I'm like, you can throw darts at a board and hit. So like,
Big, what is it? Giant projects are very, very poor at hiding. So, that's a good one.
What's on the horizon for Hercules? We expecting more drill results?
yeah, no, it's been a long wait for assays, just painful lab delays and that sort of thing, but imminent, right? Lab results, assays are imminent here for the first few holes. Yep. And so we got 5 rigs still spinning. They're gonna be spinning until the snow flies, basically, until we can't drill anymore. So there's no specific target in mind. We're initially going for 12,000 meters. We're just gonna drill as much as humanly possible, basically. And I mean, we've got this new MT anomaly now, which is pretty incredible. It's telling us there's, what looks to be a second center to the south under these basalt covers. So, somewhere that never even had historical drilling before or anything. So we're tagging into that thing right now. The whole first hole is currently in progress in that one, but that's the one I'm definitely quite excited about because it's big. The signature, it's all continuous with Leviathan. So with this MT, I was telling you, Matt, like Leviathan lights up perfectly. Like it correlates 1-to-1 with the modeled mineralization, and then it just continues, and then it just blows up. So you get this big 3-kilometer wide donut that goes, even deeper than Leviathan. Like, I don't know.
Well, I'll leave everyone with this thought. Barrick changed its name from Barrick Gold to Barrick Metals after this Hercules deal. Maybe they knew something.
Maybe they did. Maybe they did.
That was great, man. Thanks a lot for joining us. Really fun conversation. San Lorenzo Gold, Hercules Metals. We love it. We can't wait to see the results.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Chris is currently drilling out Leviathan number 2. It sounds like he had a good deal. It's funny because we were talking about how seniors get positioned into explorers, and he did a reverse Uno and optioned their land as well. So they're totally entrenched with each other now.
We're shareholders. I didn't appreciate that it was all shares. I thought there was cash components in there. I think that that makes sense. What is Barrick going to do from a grassroots perspective? I'm sure that they had this idea from when they started the whole staking, because they can make more, get a bigger piece. But that's really interesting. I think that it's really early there still, but man, that's a lot of copper in the ground just continuing to hit over and over for it being that early. So he was like leading the way in staking in Idaho for forever. Like that's all those areas kind of, it's pretty cool to see that it's developed into this. So
strong concentration for us, our portfolio in Idaho. I'm a student of the 8Ps, Casey's 8Ps, and I like how he mentioned that his company that he pitched kind of checkmarked all the 8Ps, but one of them, the people, was a big, not a check mark, but a big X or black hole.
Yeah, we've said together this run, we've been very burned. We'll do a segment at some point on our worst trades, but we've been very burned by bad people, and not that they're bad people, but just that just when management isn't aligned with you, just your vision and stuff, it's very hard in venture. Like I think that aligned visions are very important, right? Like you have a similar outlook, you have a similar belief system in terms of like what the company should do, because you lose a lot. And I think that, when you lose and things take time. And so when you start losing and things take time, if you don't have conviction in that team, then you start selling too early. You don't have price targets associated with it. You lose your belief system. I think that's, you gotta align with management. You gotta believe in the people and not just the project. So that is a key thing when we look into San Lorenzo.
I'm in Beaver Creek next week, so we won't do an episode next week. We'll make it up to you guys the week after that with a great guest and
talk about Beaver Creek. See what everyone's gonna be very excited with all the money being made in the market right now. I won't be there, but I look forward to hearing from you what's going on.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Talk to you.
Thanks, Cejay.